Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Kris. And there you go. Gotta scoot back a little bit. Okay. This was requested. This is part 2. Why does it keep doing that? It goes away. Anyways, this is the decline of Britain's failed Hitler. And here he is right here, Oswald Mosley. I gotta tell you, here's another one, Oswald Mosley Explained. I'll be honest, I had never heard this man's name before, which not a shock because it's not American, politics. So still interesting. There's a Winston guy, Churchchild or something. Winston Churchchild, I hear, is pretty popular. I don't know anything about that guy either. I'm joking. It's Winston Churchill. Joking. I get it. I can't see because the light's there, but I do have a book. Oh, there it is. I have an audio book on him. I really want to read that too. He's another person I find fascinating. How did this happen? Oh no. Hold on. It's an emergency. Someone's dying. Okay. Crisis averted. I may have lied. The cord was wrapped around the wheel of my chair. I may have exaggerated how dangerous the situation was. But anyways, hey, how are you? So this is part 2. If you can click that thumbs up, bare minimum, please, helps me out. I have ADD brain or something because I just was like, hey, Oswald Mosley, I already read that. Subscribe to the channel. If you like the content, click on the thanks button. If you want to donate to the channel, keep it rolling. See, it does this again. Did it take it away? No, it didn't. Okay, so I don't know why it's doing that. It's freaking me out. Okay, let's get into part 2.
Up so soon, and now he had a chip on his shoulder, a chip the size of a small car.
Well, friends, it's very good of you to turn up in such large numbers on a cold afternoon.
And so he started to do these rallies, these big speeches in front of people. And really, this is kind of where the trouble would start. So you got to remember, now that the new party had formed and it split off from Labour, a lot of the Labour supporters, the communists, the socialists, all these bros, they were seeing Mosley as a defector, and they were seeing him as trying to split the vote away from Labour. In our two-party system, that de facto gives the win to the other party. It's a slightly flawed system. So at these rallies, there would be these fights that would break out from the kind of more radical socialist communists.
Let me hear him say that one more time.
De facto gives the win to the other party. It's a slightly flawed. Mosley as a defector, and they were seeing him as trying to split the vote away from Labour. In our two-party system, that de facto gives the win to the other party. It's a slightly flawed system.
Okay, so they're saying he was trying to take the vote away from the other one that maybe, let me rephrase this. There's a two-party system. He's trying to form a third party, and that party, this one. Let's go over here because I'm going to end up doing this, and people are going to be like, hey, back to you. So his party is going to want to try to take votes away from this party, which would then get this party elected, is what he's saying, if I'm correct, which is pretty much what happens. It's not what happens here, but it is a sign of things that happen here. On a side note, I was listening to an interview with John Kiriakou, who was in Greece, and he said that when Greece, I don't know if it's current, how their system is currently, but when you win like the presidency or the prime minister or whatever the title is, I know clearly nothing about Greece. That party gets 50 more seats in their Congress so that there isn't a situation where they will ever be bogged down with having to negotiate. Pretty much whoever wins, their party gets all the seats. And I thought, well, that kind of sucks because you would, that's unchecked power in a way. Anyways, I don't live there, so
So at these rallies, there would be these fights that would break out from the kind of more radical socialist communists who would go to these rallies and cause a bit of bother. By that, I mean just endless heckling and fighting with the Mosley boys. And so Mosley got a little bit scared and he hired some bodyguards. He got a boxer by the name of Kid Lewis. And it's just very important to note that Kid Lewis was Jewish. So we can probably assume that in the late 1920s, Mosley had yet to slip into anti-Semitism. That or he just didn't know he was Jewish. Anyway, the next election comes. The new party puts some candidates forward. In 1931, they don't win a single seat. With his tail between his legs, Mosley went abroad and embarked upon the fascism holiday.
My friends, it's an immense responsibility. You're living in a historic hour. Do remember that always. Live in that sense, I beg of you, of history and of destiny.
After packing his sun cream, Mosley headed over to Italy and met with none other than Mussolini. This was the moment where he really kind of joined the dark side. Mosley in 1931 just he killed off the new party and made a new party called the British Union of Fascists, and that would start in 1932. But it's very important that we understand that in this time, the early 1930s, the ideas of communism and fascism, you can't look at them how we look at them now, because we saw them play out. We saw what happened. Spoiler alert, it wasn't good. But in this time, these are these new sexy ideas that all the cool kids are having. And in this climate of like the Great Depression, the poor are getting poorer, these movements were specifically geared towards the working class and to try and fix society. In that regard, these two ideologies do have a fair bit in common, but they have two very different ways of functioning. And they play out in different ways in different countries, but communism was focused on basically reducing class difference. There was no difference in your status in society. The decision making in society around industry and government would be collective. They had this kind of approach of globalism. They wanted to spread the revolution throughout the world and to create a shared identity for all these communist nations. The idea was that we're all the same, we're all in it together, we're all the proletariat. The ideas of fascism, especially Mosley's form of it, was to create a state-controlled society that does have a hierarchy, as opposed to the communists, that focuses on self-sufficiency. So one nation can look after itself. They do so by protectionist policies, high tariffs on imports, and this would be a corporatist state. So it still allowed for private property and hierarchy. However, there'd be like a system of decision-making that was done through collective voting, where employees and work unions would have a say, but they were underneath the employers, who were all underneath the state, but they all had like a percentage of say in a decision. So they didn't want to...
Hold on.
All underneath the state, but they all had like a percentage.
Capo? Isn't that what the... Okay. That's like what the mafia... Like, that's how they speak. Gran Consiglio Fascista. Yeah, that's straight up. That sounds like it's coming from the mafia.
Of say in a decision. So they didn't want to remove class differences, but they thought that you could make a shared identity through nationalism. But the thing with this very nationalistic identity is it can devolve a bit, and often there will be like this fear of the outsider. Very often Jewish people, or so it can be communists, and they become like the enemy, the shared enemy, and that further bolsters our identity. And then finally, there's often rhetoric around like strong state leadership, and also like this idea of restoring a nation to its former glory. And that's why there's often this desire to rebuild old empires.
Italy was saved by a new movement, by a modern movement of youth, of vigor, of determination.
When Mosley came back from Europe, it was like when your school friend had come back from summer holiday and was now an emo.
Lift up your voices in this great meeting in the heart of England. Send to all the world a message. England lives and marches on.
You can certainly see Mussolini, a little bit of Hitler vibes in the speeches, the screaming, the drastic hand gestures and stuff like that. Yeah, it makes sense that he saw that and it seemed to work over there, so why not do it over here? Now, maybe it's a common thing. Maybe people just frequently talk with their hands, and I just don't know it, so what do I know? All I know is that when I do that, it screws up my green screen. But, you know, you can see it a little bit more.
Mosley had completely reskinned. You know, he was like a knockoff Hitler and Mussolini.
I've not seen the video, I swear. I swear I've not seen this video, but that's exactly how the vibe was that I just got. And look at this guy going, oh, that YouTube dude, he called you out, bro. Oh.
Wore the military uniforms. He had his own gang of black shirts surrounding him. Even had his own cool mustache. If you look at the rallies and the way he would speak, his speaking patterns, you know, there was someone it kind of seemed similar to.
And I did study all that kind of person, and it's very essential to do it. That doesn't mean you identify yourself with them. It merely means that you learn from great performers how to do certain things.
And
but you did. I understand what he's trying to get at. I do. You know, you take something that you see working and then you apply that. The problem is you're taking two people who weren't really good people and you're using the same crowd-stirring rhetoric. We've been wronged and we will not stand for it. Yeah, I get it. It riles people up, sure. But why are you studying some of the worst people?
And it was working. He really did capture Britain's attention for a period of time. You know, infamously, the Daily Mail published an op-ed called Hurrah for the Black Shirts, in which they go on to praise this movement. And he had respected politicians, economists, and lords supporting him. This was a real period of time where there was such a distrust in mainstream established politics, who had been seen as not solving the problems of the working class. And so it bred an environment where those people were very susceptible to crazy new ideas. It was just a feeling of like, fuck it, what have we got to lose? Lady Cynthia, who was Mosley's first wife, she died. He married a rather notorious lady called Diana Mitford. She happened to just be a big fan and supporter of Hitler. Mosley pretty much met her by just like spaffing out fascist talking points to her, which I'm pretty sure is like how Twitter incels think that you meet women. But when they got married, they wanted to keep it a secret. And so they got married with the help of Frau Goebbels. If that surname sounds familiar, it might be because you're thinking of Joseph Goebbels.
Einmal wird unsere Geduld zu Ende sein und dann wird den...
It was his wife. That was his wife, Joseph Goebbels. And when they got married, there was another shady bro, you could say, who was there. His name was Adolf Hitler. And Adolf, he had a present to give Mosley on his wedding, and that was a signed photo of himself. I don't know how you would respond to receiving that. I suppose you would say thanks.
By the way, if any one of you are planning on getting married, I'll send you a signed photo of myself. You're welcome.
Kind of hoping for a blender, but this is nice.
And it seemed to me, rightly or wrongly, that's a question we could debate, that certain Jews were trying to provoke a second world war.
Mosley would embark on these now very sinister-looking rallies, complete with, you know, fucking Nazi salutes. All of it just seems very like an Audi's own brand version of fascism. But as I say, it was popular until 1934, where a big incident would occur that would send the British Union of Fascists down a different path. The Olympia Rally. So this was meant to be the BUF's biggest rally. It was in front of 10,000 people, and within those 10,000 people, there were planted 500 anti-fascists who disrupted the meeting. They were provoking a reaction, and the black shirts beat these anti-fascists to a pulp. The audience loved it. Wider society, not so keen. It's really interesting to note that the original first few years of the British Union of fascists, they weren't anti-Semitic, at least openly or in their rhetoric and policies. But this seems to be the turning point. You know, he considered that most of these people were Jewish, and now he started to do the I hate the Jews spiel.
People don't understand now in those great mass meetings, which some people were trying to break up. And the speaker had to hold his own, and if you saw that they'd come from another country to break up an English meeting, you gave them a rough answer.
However, and as stupid as it feels like to have to explain the differences, his anti-Semitism was different to Hitler's. That obviously doesn't make it better, but it is important to note. Hitler had all these views on, like, you know, racial superior, you know, like better blood, better genetic, this kind of thing. Mosley didn't. His came from more of a fear of the outside, fear of influence from different nations, and this sort of attitude of, you know, we don't hate them, we just really love us. It's de facto the same shit, but it's easier to sell that talking point than trying to talk about bloodline purity. Mosley didn't want to like exterminate anyone, he just wanted to get them far away from us. You know, and it'd be this whole like make Britain for the British kind of vibe. If you think about how at the beginning he was sort of anti-Germans, you can see a consistency in this sort of attitude of protectionist, self-sufficient economy, very pro-nationalistic and very skeptical to foreign influence. So I think it was an element of he did have those views, but now the scapegoat across Europe was now the Jewish people. So he kind of jumped on that now as a popular cause that would lead to the same ends.
In the lives of great nations comes the moment of decision, comes the moment of destiny.
In the early 1930s, it was looking for a split moment Britain might have turned to fascism. Or was it? Following the Olympia incident, the mood around Mosley completely changed. The newspapers and the MPs that last week were shouting hurrah for the black shirts were now like, fascism? No! Fascism? More like Naffism. BBC banned Mosley and the British Union of Fascists from their airwaves. So now they were forced to start streaming on Kick and Rumble, as well just in the sort of general public. By the mid to late 1930s, the attitudes towards fascism had started to change. 1934, Hitler rose to power through a military coup. The once sexy and fun idea of fascism was starting to not look so chill. So the BUF had a decision to make. You know, do they adjust the tone? You know, water it down a little bit. Maybe we can start serving shakshuka in the canteen. Or they could just go full extremist and just try and guess which one they picked. 1936, the BUF marched for a predominantly Jewish neighborhood in London, and that went just sort of about as well as you might expect. This was called the Battle of Cable Street. He continued to organize these marches and rallies, etc., leading to the Public Order Act of 1936, where the British government banned political uniforms and quasi-military styled organizations. His rallies really would become these spectacles of unrest. In 1937 in Liverpool, Mosley was knocked unconscious by 2 stones that were thrown after he delivered a Nazi salute on top of a van in front of 8,000 people. But you see, whilst all of this was happening, there was something else bubbling up underneath the surface. Britain was seeing Hitler go mental and they were getting a little bit anxious. Whispers and rumours of a potential war was starting to emerge. Mosley took a position of being anti-war. He didn't want the war to happen. You know, he was trying to tell people, guys, Hitler, he's not that bad. He was actually really funny at my wedding. And I joke, but this, to be honest, does seem a consistent view that Mosley has had since the beginning. He seemed to always have been anti-war. But to many others, it seemed as though he wanted Hitler to win, take over Europe, and put Mosley in charge. This is a claim that Mosley denies, and he says if the Germans came to Britain, he would fight. But regardless of the shoulda, woulda, couldas, just the optics alone of siding with Hitler, yeah, they weren't great. It really just wasn't good branding, and this really was like the final nail of Oswald Mosley's career. The 1937 elections happened, and the BUF won absolutely no seats.
The responsibility lies on the shoulders of one man. By his latest act of naked aggression, Hitler has committed a crime not only against Poland, but against the whole human race.
Britain went to war in 1939, and spoiler alert, we won. In this time, Mosley, his wife, and many BUF members were put in prison because they were kind of seen as traitors. People were scared that they posed a risk of, being spies or trying to make some kind of problem here in Britain during a war. He was never formally charged with a crime. He was interned under defense regulation. But basically, after they all got arrested, this killed the BUF. However, after all of this, after World War II, seeing what happened, somehow Mosley didn't give up. Now that it wasn't as marketable to be anti-Jew, he took on a new cause, a new enemy, and that was multiculturalism. He chose to become anti-immigration. He also rebranded as being pro-EU, which, if we consider far-right politics now, is just surprising. That wouldn't be a stance they would have. But either way, being known as the guy who supported the Nazis during World War II, you couldn't come back from that. That's a lot. I don't think Logan Paul could bounce back from that one. And so he kind of just faded into irrelevancy.
That's just a terrible picture of all the people Nazi saluting him, and he's just standing there. Yeah, you can't come back for that. You can't come back for that, did I say? I meant to say you can't come back from that.
Now, coming back from the First World War, after that time in the air and in the trenches and in the loss of all my friends, I was very strongly against another war.
Look, I don't know if I'm just a romantic who likes a good story, but I can't help but see like a tragedy story in Mosley's life. It's very easy in retrospect to just look at him as a purely bad fascist dictator wannabe. Fair enough, I get that. But from my research, it really seems that somewhere in the darkness and trauma of what he went through in World War I, he became a man just pained by a deeply utopian and idealistic attitude. He himself and everyone...
See, I get after World War I see it as somebody who wanted to achieve power. He didn't want to be told, and I could be wrong, this is just how I'm feeling. He didn't want to be told, you have to go fight. He didn't want to see people. He saw a lot of shit in World War I. So he didn't want to put people through that. I believe he was anti-war. And I do believe that if the Germans had come to England, the UK, I do believe he would have fought because he had to. But by then, I question, would he have fought if the Germans just got on boats or planes and went to England? Or would he have done something when those first missiles were fired or when the bombs dropped? If there was no troops there, would he have been like, oh, well, they clearly were meaning to send those bombs to, to France or to Africa, probably Africa. They just went off course. I do believe he would have fought. You just have to wonder, how long would he have waited? Would the people and Parliament and everything else been like, okay, listen, dude, it's time. Would he have even made it that long? Because somebody like Winston Churchill would have come around and said, yeah, I'm going to take over here because we've got to do something. But I see him as somebody who wanted power. I don't know if he would have used the power in terms of sending the military to other places. I do believe him going through World War I, not wanting to go through all that again. But I don't know a whole lot about him. I'm just going by what I've seen. I could be completely wrong, which would not be a shock, let's be honest.
Around him made him out like he was the man who was going to change the world. But then after being in the system for so long, he became disillusioned, and that led him to get radicalized slowly and slowly. When he saw the efficiency of a totalitarian dictator.
See, that's what I'm saying. He saw other people who had seized power, and he saw how they acted. And so he did the same thing. But you're going off of people seizing power who are not good people. That's a downfall to me, or a bad character flaw.
He realized, well, you know, I could do it the way of democracy, or I could do it by force.
Yeah.
And he went from being beloved to being completely hated. And there's a part in one interview with him where he's like on death's door. This is him a few years before dying. And he still talks as if he might become prime minister. This is an old aged man after all he'd went through. This once feared, powerful fascist was now a weak, frail man, yammering on, thinking that he might still become the prime minister.
You still believe the call might come for you? Do you really
yes,
believe that?
I'm much better now than I've ever been in my life. I've still
Better
got
at what, sir?
better at politics. But happily, history abounds in cases of men who went on to 10 or 15 years older than I am now and did extraordinary things. Therefore, I feel that my whole life has been a training for what can now come.
So in conclusion, I obviously abhor...
It's pretty sad that he believes the door is still open, and he doesn't understand that his own actions and speeches and that he closed that door himself. He kicked it shut as he walked through it. And he doesn't realize that, you know, he's wanting the people to open that door and say, come back to us. We've been waiting for you. You've been waiting for us, and it's time. And he doesn't realize that as he's in that room just going, they know I'm in here. They know I'm in here. They're going to come through that door. Meanwhile, they're on the other side like going, he hasn't opened it quickly. Let's cement this door shut so we never have to worry about him again. Just keep putting the bricks up. But at least, maybe a saving grace on this aspect, he stepped away and he expected them to, everyone to come calling for him. And so people are like, just don't say his name. Don't say his name. Don't put it in print. Let's just move on. This is a bad chapter. And I'm going to sneeze. Good job, stupid. He just slammed his head right into the table. That's what you do. Yeah, I sneezed the intelligence, the little amount that I had. He fortunately stepped away, figuring everyone was going to come calling, instead of trying to throw himself deeper into the politics and potentially some sort of a hostile takeover to where he was going to make sure he was a prime minister. Fortunately, he didn't go that aspect, because you saw he was already capable of having his black shirt group go around and fight people. So he didn't go the violent route when he probably could have. But then again, maybe he just saw the writing on the wall. I don't know.
Or Mosley's politics. But I do think a combination of like tragedy and idealism can lead people down dark paths, where what might once have been genuine concern and compassion can be twisted into nihilism and hatred. Unemployment, economic instability, deep inequality, and most importantly, disillusionment with mainstream politics is a fucking rife breeding ground for radicalization and extremism. And this is something we see on both sides to this day happening right now.
White people are all racist.
One people, one nation, and
Russia. Can we give a round of applause for Russia?
It is okay to be white.
No, that's not okay.
There's a lot of things that I love about Hitler.
This
So, yeah, it's perfectly fine to be white. I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. What am I supposed to go do? Jump off a cliff? Too bad. Deal with it. It's perfectly fine to be black. It's perfectly fine to be... That's it. No, I'm joking. It's perfectly fine to only be... No, I'm kidding. All right. It's perfectly fine to be anything. You have no choice in the matter. You are what you were born to be. All right. This is good. I didn't know anything about this gentleman. So this is very interesting. Well, if you have any other ones, definitely, I would like to see them. So, yeah. They don't have to be American. They can be anything. I don't care. So until next time, have a good day. Have a good night.